Time to talk League One again, and this time we're predicting where I think every team will finish as of today, the 29th of July. Well, it's just clocked over to the 30th of July, but we're putting together my predictions, and I'm going to let you guys know who I think is going to finish where. I think there's a few teams that you can probably already put in their expected positions. We're going to go from bottom to top. I will try and give my reasons for why I think teams are going to be where they are. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. While you're down there, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell, and smash the like button to push this channel to brand new audiences. We've had a really good month here on the channel in July. It's one of the best months we've ever had, and I just want to thank you all for the support. It does not go unnoticed. Hopefully over the next few months we will be able to get into doing some live streams so that I can chat with you guys live about League One, the Championship, and anything else that you guys want to talk about. So let's get into this predictions video right now. So we're starting off at the bottom of the league. I think Crawley Town are going down at the bottom. They've lost some of their key players from last season, and it's nothing against Scott Lindsay. It's nothing against Crawley Town as a team. I think they're really going to try their best, and I do think they're going to give it a really good go, but I just think they've lost too much quality, and I do think they're going to end up going straight back down to League Two. Hopefully I'm wrong, hopefully it's more competitive down the bottom, but I do think they're going to be the team that sits right down there for probably the majority of the season. If you're a Crawley Town fan, I don't want you to get offended. I want them to do well. I always want the promoted clubs to do well because I'm a big fan of the underdog. I really want underdogs to do well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one goes for Crawley, but I do think it's going to be a massive struggle. I think the Crawley Town fans probably agree with me. So next up in 23rd place, I've put Stockport County. Now, I do think they could have a good season, but I think League One is a lot more punishing this year. I think some of the best teams from last year, your Boltons, your Peterboroughs, Blackpools, Lincolns, are still here. But then you've also got the additions of your Rotherhams, your Huddersfields, your Birmingham. And then you've also got teams like Charlton, Wigan, Reading, who aren't in the shit situations they were in this time last year. And I do think that's going to show at the bottom end of the table. I do think Stockport are going to go down. I hope they don't, but I do think they will. Like as I said in the previous one, I'm a big fan of the underdog. I really want underdogs to do well, and I think I could be miles off it. I really could be, but this is just my opinion. I do think Stockport are going to go down. Now, if you haven't checked out my preview video, I spoke about Shrewsbury Town, and I do think they're going to struggle this season. Obviously, they've had a lot of changes off-field, on-field really, player-wise, and they weren't really impressive last year. They've always been a struggle for Derby County sides, like they always seem to fucking beat us. And I mentioned yesterday that I don't necessarily think beating Derby in pre-season is necessarily a way to judge future success in the season, but I do think Shrewsbury Town are going to be that final club to go down. It is 3 that goes down, I'm fairly sure. It's going to be interesting to see what does happen because it could be really interesting this season with obviously everything that's going on. It is going to be a very interesting season in League One. Some big teams down there now. Now, I could be wrong and it might not be 3 clubs, but I'm almost certain it's 3 clubs that go down, and this would put Shrewsbury Town down. And the main reason is all the change. I think Paul Hurst is a great manager at League One level, but I just think he's not going to have enough in his squad. Lost some big players this summer. Then I've got Cambridge. Now, I could put them higher, but I think it's going to be really tight between that final relegation place and probably about 15th. It was very similar last season as well, where you sort of had, the table was literally split into 3. You had sort of like, I think it was like 1st to like 8th were over in like 10 points for a majority of the season. And then you had like 8th to like 12th, 13th, 14th that were in like 10 points as well. And then you had everyone behind them was all within like 5 or 6 points. And I think the case at the bottom of the table is you just got to pick up the results, get draws. And that's what you need to see from those teams down at the bottom. Obviously, last season, Gary Monk kept up Cambridge United. It's going to be interesting to see what they do this year. I do think they'll stay up. But I don't think it was being comfortable. I'm not saying it was comfortable, really. I think they still only stayed up on the final day because they won their game. But it's one of those for me where I do certainly think they're going to be down at the bottom and certainly going to be battling that relegation. We go on now to 20th place, where I've put Exeter City. I do think that League One is one of those leagues where everything depends on the teams that go down and come up. Now, I think Wrexham are going to have a really good season. I think they're probably going to be sort of bottom half to mid-table, maybe even top half. We'll get into them in a minute. But I just Exeter normally start well and then drop off. A bit like Port Vale did last year. I think at one point they were second after like 2 or 3 games. I know it's only 2 or 3 games, but like started really well. And they just dropped like a stone. And Exeter was sort of in and around it for a while, then disappeared off the face of the earth, then sort of nearly fell into a relegation battle and then sort of stayed in the league. Obviously by quite some margin, ended up finishing 13th. But it was one of those where it was a bit of a flip-flop, and I don't think you can flip-flop all too often in League One. I think eventually it catches you out, and I think they'll stay up. I think they'll finish in 20th place, as I've mentioned, but I do think it's going to be a struggle for them. We then go on to Bristol Rovers. Now, Chris Martin was one of their better players last season. I believe he's still at the club, but it's going to be interesting to see how they do. I thought back end of last season, I thought they were abysmal. Against Derby County, you could tell which team had the playoffs and promotion to play for and which team didn't. We just fought for every ball and they just didn't. And I think it's those situations which end up seeing you into a relegation battle. So I do think Bristol Rovers are going to end up finishing 19th. You can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I've then got Mansfield Town. I do think they're going to stay up. I think Nigel Clough is going to bring in some impressive loans over the next few weeks. I do think he'll probably tap into contacts at previous clubs, Derby County, Nottingham Forest, maybe even some Premier League teams as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does there. There's obviously some big players in the academies at Derby, Forest, Leicester that could all improve that Mansfield Town squad. He'll probably look at other clubs as well. So I've got them down at 18th. You can let me know what you think down in the comments. But it's going to be one of those. I just do think they're going to stay up. I think Nigel Clough just has that edge. I've then gone Stevenage. Right. I know they finished 9th last year. We're well in the playoff hunt. But that was under Steve Evans. I'm not saying I know a great deal about Alex Revel or Revel, whatever it is. But I just don't think he's Steve Evans. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I personally think they're going to struggle this year. They've lost some key players to Burton, to Stevenage, not to Stevenage, to Rotherham, as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near the top half, as you'd see. I've got them in 17th. So yeah, it's one of those, I could be miles off it with all of these, and we'll find out at the end of the season. We'll review it around Christmas time, and then we'll review it at the end of the season. It's going to be certainly an interesting one. Then I've got Northampton Town. Now, they finished 14th last year and sort of went under the radar. I think this season, obviously I've got them in 16th place. I think they're still going to have a good season. I think they're still going to be safe. But I think it's going to be a bit more difficult. I think they still need a bit more quality in the squad. I think they lacked a bit last year, but because no one really knew what to expect, they got some fairly decent results. And it's like back end of the year, I think picked up a really good result against us. I think it was a 1-0 win it turned out to be in the end. We missed about 6 or 7 clear-cut chances that game as well, which made it even more disappointing for us. But I think they did really well to finish in 14th, but I don't think it's going to be the same for them this year. I don't think they're going to be able to go under the radar. I've got Wrexham in 15th. Now, I do think they're going to have a good season, but I think they're going to lose out to that powerhouse nature of the top half of League One. There's a lot of teams in sort of this league that I think like they could either be bottom half or top 6, and Wrexham is one of them. I've put them in the bottom half because I think they're missing a bit of talent. Yes, they've got some big names in the squad. Most of them are sort of older, which could give them a helping hand, really. But I just think they're going to finish 15th. I think they're the best of the promoted teams by far. And I do think they're going to end up finishing in 15th. I think Parkinson will make it through the year quite easily. I think they'll probably struggle to start off with, bring in some players in January and then fly up the league a little bit. They might not end up finishing 15th. They could end up in that top half. But as I said earlier, there's so many teams in this league that I think could either finish in the bottom half or in the top 6, because League One is so volatile, and the way teams change, realistically, it's every 2 years. Most League One clubs do 2-year contracts, and they change so often that you can just flip-flop in the blink of an eye. So I think Wrexham are going to be 15th. Yeah, let me know what you think about that one. Then I've got Wycombe. 14th place, Matt Bloomfield in charge there. He could have a really good season, I think, and I think there is a real good opportunity for him. Obviously, they finished 10th last year. Could they go one step better? I personally don't think so. I think there's much better teams in the league this year. If you go back to last year, Wigan were relegated, Reading were relegated, who else was relegated? And Blackpool, right? The only one of those relegated teams that finished ahead of them was Blackpool. And I think the other two, Reading and Wigan, obviously had their own problems. And I think this season, all 3 relegated teams should finish in the top half easily, without a shadow of a doubt. So, obviously, I think Wycombe will have a good season. I think you'll look at them predicted to finish 14th right now and think, they must not, you must think they're not going to have a good season. But I think you can have a good season respective and relative to what other teams are doing in your league, and I think that is what's going to happen to Wycombe. I don't think they've got the financial situation. I do believe they've undergone a takeover, but I don't think they have the financial situation of some of the other clubs. I don't think they're in a position to sort of battle those top end teams. Now, they could have a freak season, but I just personally can't see it. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below or in this top corner to stay tuned for all of my latest Derby County and EFL Championship and League One content that's going to be heading your way. Obviously, we've got the previews out, the predictions are out as well now for Championship and League One. So make sure you check out those videos. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments of all of them, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. But now I'll let you get back to the video. Next up is Leyton Orient, and pretty similar to Wycombe, I do think they're still going to have a good season by their own standards and respective to the rest of the league, but I just can't see them being in that situation where you've obviously got the likes of Wigan, Reading, obviously Blackpool. You've got all those teams, Huddersfield, Birmingham, Rotherham have all come down. I just think they're going to falter slightly. I think they're going to finish 13th. I think they'll still look back at the end of next season and think it's been a good season. But obviously, my prediction-wise, if they was to finish 13th, that's what I mean. But I do think it's going to be a bit more difficult than last year. But we'll have to see what happens. I think Richie Wellens has got a fairly decent squad there. Jordan Brown, ex-Derby Academy graduate, he has gone from strength to strength since leaving Derby. And I'm disappointed we let him go, but it was one of those things that had to happen at the time. It was administration. He's done well since going to Leyton Orient, and I do think they're going to finish 13th. Let's get on to the next team. We've got Wigan. They finished 12th last year. I think they're going to finish 12th this year. Although, thinking about it, points deduction-wise, they might finish a bit higher because they haven't had one this season. They still may get one, but they haven't had one yet. I think Sean Maloney is slowly turning into a really good manager. They do have a fairly young squad. I do believe that they are going to lose a couple of their youngsters. I think one of their youngsters called Hughes. I want to say Charlie Hughes, but that could be very wrong. I think his name is Hughes, though. Looks as if he's going to go to Hull City, which obviously speaks the volumes of how good he was last season. I do think Sean Maloney's slowly turning into a good manager, as I just said. I think Wigan are going to have a good season. And it's just one where I hope they can stay out of trouble and not have to worry about off-field problems and things like that, points deductions. But we'll have to see what happens with that one. I think they're going to finish in 12th place. You let me know your thoughts down below. Next up, I've got Reading. Yes, they finished 17th last season, and yes, I still think they're missing a bit of quality, but they had an abundance of points deductions. I think if you take the points deductions and put them back on, I think they finish well within mid-table. And then obviously, they have a good squad. They have a good core of players like Charlie Savage, Harvey Nibbs, Sam Smith. They've got a really good core of players that are good for this club and could take this club to the next level. Obviously, yes, they've lost players along the way with obviously their off-field issues, and it's going to be interesting to see how those off-field issues develop. But I do think Ruben Sellers is one of the best managers in League One, and I do think if anybody can get them to finish mid-table without deductions, I think he will be the one. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Reading, because they could quite easily end up losing half their squad before the end of the window after I've recorded this, or getting a takeover and completely changing the look of their team. But I don't know that right now. So this is based on what we know as of today. Today being the 30th, as it's clocked over right now. And then you've got Barnsley. Daryl Clark is in charge there. I've got them in 10th place. And they had a struggle last year. And it was towards the back end of the season. They've lost a lot of players. And they've not really brought a great deal in. And I like Daryl Clark. I think he could be really good for Barnsley. But I just don't think they've got the quality to the level that they had last season. Obviously, McAtee's moved on. Devante Cole's moved on. And obviously an abundance of other players have moved on. Herbie Kane as well. So it's one of those for me where I still think they could be within that picture of the playoffs. I do think it's going to be very tight again this year, obviously, as it was last year for that final playoff place. I do think Barnsley are going to be in and around it, but I just think they're going to be at the back end of it, a bit like a Leyton Orient last year, a Lincoln City, a Blackpool, who were sort of on the back end of sort of that chase. Obviously, Blackpool and Lincoln could have got in on the final day. Barnsley did. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one does play out for Barnsley this season. But yeah, I've got them in 10th. In 9th, I've got Blackpool. They've lost a lot of talent in Karamoko Dembele. They've also bought back Jordan Rhodes. I think they're going to score goals. I think they're going to have their problems as they did last year. And that is the reason why I've got them in 9th. Obviously, there's still a long way to go in the transfer window. So when we look at this in December, we could look back and go, oh, well, they bought in this player on the deadline day and that completely revolutionised the midfield or completely revolutionised their strike force. Like if we go back to Derby County, who bought in Ibu Adams towards the back end of the January window, completely changed the outlook of their team for the rest of the season. Our team, whatever. And that's the biggest example I can give. We looked short in midfield, very short, and we didn't have any tackling nous in there. We bought in Ibu Adams, changed everything. And that could happen for Blackpool. They could bring in 2 players over the next week that completely changes the outlook and perspective of the team. But right now, I've got them finishing in 9th. Then I've got Lincoln City in 8th. I think they're just going to miss out on playoffs again. And realistically, it's not because I don't think they're good enough to get playoffs. It's because they've lost some big players in Jensen, Sorensen, 2 massive players in my opinion for what they did. Obviously they have bought players in as well. They've lost Joe Taylor as well, another one who moved on at the end of his loan spell. So it's one of those for me where I think they're just going to be outside of it. I don't think they're going to have the capacity to be in that upper echelons with the likes of Birmingham, Rotherham, Huddersfield, Bolton, Peterborough. But it's going to be interesting to see how they develop, because they've had a really, really good 7 or 8 months, really, since the turn of the year. And it's going to be interesting to see where they end up. In 7th place, I've got Burton Albion. Now, Mark Robinson's gone in and used his knowledge to pick up some really, really good players. Obviously, they've picked up Dylan Williams, Charlie Webster, Danny Orsi from Crawley. They've got some really, really good players in their squad. It's going to be interesting to see how it all fits together and how they play this season. I am really interested to see, but I do think they're going to be in that playoff battle. Obviously, they finished near enough bottom of the table last year, 20th place, nearly went down, but I do think that Burton Albion are going to be this surprise package that isn't really a surprise if you look at some of the deals they've made. But yeah, I think they're going to finish in 20th place. Next up, I've got Charlton. I think they're going to finish in 6th. I just think Nathan Jones has got a way around budgets and squads, and I do think he's going to really compete this year. They had a really bad start to the year last year, which sort of kept them out of contention for everything. But after Nathan Jones came in, it was a complete revitalisation of the squad. And I do think they're going to be well within that playoff hunt. Obviously, they've lost some big names this year, which is one of the reasons why I haven't put them higher. If they still had Alfie May, I'd have probably put them 4th. But losing Alfie May, it's a 20-goal-a-season striker at the level, and it's a massive, massive loss. Next up, I've got Bolton Wanderers. Now, I think they have to get promoted this year. Otherwise, I think Everett will lose his job. Obviously, they've come from a very, very difficult situation that they went through all the way down. And they've come back up and they've done really, really well, especially battling the way they have done over recent seasons. I think they've been in the League One playoffs the last 2 years. I do think they'll be in them again. But I think if they don't get promoted, I think Everett's head is going to be on a chopping block. It's not something that I want to see because I quite like Ian Everett. I think Bolton as a whole seem to believe they are better than what they are, and I think that's what we saw last season. It caused a lot of friction between fan bases. There were some players and staff at Bolton saying certain things along the lines of, we're the best team in League One, blah de blah, and quite clearly they weren't. And that's what we saw from Bolton, and I do think they've got to show a bit more this year, and I do think they will. But I think the problem that they have is, you look at the likes of Birmingham City, the money they're spending. You look at Huddersfield Town, the players they've got and have bought in, and you look at Rotherham. I just can't see them finishing above any of them. And then you've also got to talk about who is next on my list. In 4th place, Peterborough United. They just find a way every year, and they're a very, very good side. They lose players, they bring in a youngster. They lose another player, they bring in another youngster, and they always seem to perform. Nah, that says Darren Ferguson. I'm sure his name's Duncan Ferguson. No, that's the Everton guy. But yeah, I think Ferguson's a brilliant manager at League One level. I think he could quite easily get them promoted this year. I just don't think it's going to be automatic promotion. Realistically, I think every League One club from last season, the League Two clubs, they're battling for playoffs at best. I just can't see those 3 sides that have been relegated not being in and around it, not being within the playoffs or automatic promotion. And that's what we're going to see next up when you look at Huddersfield Town in 3rd. I think Michael Duff has just got a way of getting results in this league. Obviously, we saw what he did at Barnsley. I think he's a brilliant manager. Obviously, I think he had a tough spell. I think it was at Swansea. But I do think he'll turn that around this season with Huddersfield. I think they'll end up 3rd. I think they'll end up in the playoffs. We then go on to who I've got in 2nd place, and it's Steve Evans and Rotherham. I think Evans is an excellent manager at the level. He just has a way of playing that gets results. We spoke about it earlier when talking about Stevenage and how I think they're going to struggle this year. And I think the reason why Stevenage are going to struggle is because they don't have Evans anymore. And I think Rotherham are going to benefit from that factor. And I think Steve Evans is going to get them straight back into the Championship. And we close out with the team you're probably all expected to be here. It's Birmingham City. I think if they finish anything other than champions, they should get laughed at. Complete honesty. They've spent so much money. And they've got a squad which they'd probably argue can play in the Championship. I think a lot of teams in League One would probably say they could probably compete at Championship level. But I think Birmingham are one of the ones who would probably say, well, the players we've brought in, we should fly. And I think Birmingham fans need to realise that this season, every game they lose, they're going to get hammered. Because they shouldn't lose. They will. They will lose games, and everyone will laugh at them when they do. But this Birmingham City side, the players they've got, Bielik, Buchanan, you look at some of the players they've brought in, obviously Alfie May, 20 goal this season striker at this level. Mark Leonard, a very, very impressive player for Northampton over the course of the last few seasons. I just think Birmingham City have to win this league, and they have to win it at a canter. Otherwise, there's going to be huge, huge problems, and they're going to get battered. So that is my predictions for League One. Let me know yours down in the comments. I'm sure you're not surprised by some of the names being in certain places on the list, but let me know which ones surprise you down in the comments. While you're down there, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell and smash the like button, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.